Welcome to Microsoft Access. Since we have covered Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, and Access is very, very different from those three, I wanted to take just a few minutes to kind of run through some basic vocabulary and setup of Microsoft Access so you can kind of have a better foundation when you start working through your Access Chapter 1 tutorial. So I have opened a database. I have opened Microsoft Access. Access is a database management program. And so what a database is just a large collection of data. And so when I'm talking about a collection of data, you can collect data in Excel, you can collect data in Microsoft Word, but Access is designed to collect a huge amount of data to allow you as the user to organize that data and then to easily pull out the pieces of the data that you want to use. So I wanted to give you an example that probably made a little sense. So I've named this database NCC information. So when you think about big organizations like Nashua Community College, like most businesses, they have to collect a lot of information on their employees, in the case of NCC, on their students, that kind of thing. So they may need a different vehicle for collecting that information. That's where Microsoft Access comes in. So Access is, I have opened up a database in Microsoft Access. So just by opening it, I've created a database, and this is where I'm going to collect my information. So I've actually started one so that you can kind of see the layout. So if you look over here, one of the first things that you're going to do in the tutorial is you're going to create a couple of tables. And so I have created a table to collect information about guardians. I've created a table to collect information about NCC professors. I've created a table to collect information about student attendance, and I've just created a table to collect information about students. So the tables are just for you guys, or I'm sorry, for anyone who wants to use a database to collect information that's important to the larger database. Okay. So I actually have a personal database that I use. I'm a baseball card collector. I've been collecting baseball cards since I was 5 years old. And so I have a database collection of 10,000 baseball cards. If I want to figure out really quickly whether I have a card from 1992 of a player on the Houston Astros, I don't want to look through 10,000 cards to find that. So I use a database to collect that information. I have a table for every single team of baseball cards. Okay. So again, big chunks of information. So on my table, what you're going to see is I have what are called records. Okay. So I have a record for each student. So you can see I have a record here for Chloe Kim. I have a record here for Nathaniel Miller. I have a record here for Naomi Pichardo. And I have a record here for Diego Ortega. So what I have here then within my table are records that are relevant to this information. So I have all my student records here. Okay, so the tables are just delineations, big chunks of information that I'm looking to collect. And then the records are individual pieces of information within that table. So for the students table, I'm obviously collecting records on different students. Now, this looks like an Excel table. Okay. And so when you go to enter information in, it will kind of feel like you're entering information into, an Excel spreadsheet. But these have very different purposes. You'll notice across the top of this is called a data sheet. Across the top of the data sheet, we have some information. So we have an ID number, we have a last name, first name, email address, and then a whole bunch of others here that I just didn't fill in information because I didn't need to fill in all that stuff. Each one of these chunks of information that we are collecting for our records, these are called fields. So we have an ID field, a last name field, a first name field, an email address field, a student ID field, and so on. Okay. So when you are collecting information for your database, you have to think about, what information do I want to keep about my students? What information might I want about my professors? What information might I want about the guardians? And so that information is in the different fields. Okay. One other thing that you're going to run into early in chapter one is chapter one will talk about what's called a unique identifier. It's also known as the primary key. Those are just interchangeable terms. I'm going to refer to it as a unique identifier because I think that actually makes more sense. So, in a database, you will always want to have a field that is considered to be your unique identifier. And in this case, it's the ID number. The unique identifier is just what it sounds like. It is an identification that is unique to every single record. So, think, for example, is if we had two students named Nathaniel Miller and we were trying to figure out which one do we really want. We want to know some unique identifying information about that record so we can figure out which one we want to access. So in this case, if we had another student named Nathaniel Miller, the unique identifier would help to figure out who that is. So if our second student had the name Nathaniel Miller and a different ID number, we put that in the ID field, our unique identifier field, so we know who is who. Okay, so that's the purpose of our unique identifier or our primary key field. One other quick note, just to get you started, I want you to notice is as you're adding your records into your tables, you will always have one extra record. It's going to assume, and by it I mean Microsoft Access, our database will assume that we want to continue to add records. So there will always be an extra record so that you have a placeholder to have your next record added. And our unique identifier field, see our field right here, that will have a placeholder in it. So it will have this is really going to bother you to have some data here where you don't have a record. Don't worry about that. You're always going to have this extra record so that the next user can add data if they want to. So that should get you started. That's just some basic terminology. Just wanted you to think about the way the database is collecting information. So again, the overarching database, I named it NCC information. So we're collecting a huge amount of information. Our tables are how some of that information is broken up, kind of intuitive ways I can break that information up. Our records are individual pieces of information that fit within each table. So for our students table, we have individual records on each student. And then our fields are the individual pieces of information that we're collecting about each one of our records. So hopefully that helps to get you started and will help you as you work through your tutorial to understand a little bit of what they're having you do. If you have questions, always reach out. All right, take care.